my name is Jo Rogers and I am the CEO and founder of Navistar Legal. And today I have Matthew Mclarty, who's an entrepreneur and a friend of mine, come to talk to us a little bit about innovation in lockdown. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me join. It's great to see you again. You know, it's been too long.
This is the only way I get to actually have a chat with you, isn't it? By interviewing you.
Yeah.
Let me find out what you're up to and record it. Tell me, I know you're in Jamaica at the moment. Tell me a little bit about, and you're working, you're working in the UK from Jamaica, and you're doing things where you're at. Tell me about how did you get to where you are and why you're doing what you're doing?
So that's an interesting one. So I'm back in Jamaica now. I came home for family reasons, but as you know, I was innovation director. I was with Oxford Innovation for the last five plus years. And so I came home for family reasons. Family needed me, and here I am. And so it's been an interesting journey. Sort of leaving that whole innovation scene in the UK, where I was out at tech meetups and all these different things 2-3 nights a week after work, to coming back to the Caribbean, which I love. I'm not complaining. It's just a very different life. So it was family that kind of brought me back to where I am. As you mentioned, I'm still doing some work in the UK. Consulting and working on a few projects, so I'm still engaged, which is great. But yeah, that's what brought me back was family. That was.
Tell me a little bit about your career and your background. What got you started in the world of innovation?
So that's a really interesting one. So I would say formally I've been involved in it probably for the last 8-9 years, formally, between being involved in my own startup to working for Oxford Innovation and so on. But it was a kind of thing where I got interested in it from a long time ago, where I spent a 6-month period, kind of like a gap year university time, with a systems administrator, actually in a law firm. And that kind of lit my fire. I realized that I had an aptitude for this kind of thing. I was tinkering with computers and helping them to sort out user problems and all that. And that kind of lit my fire. And so it's something that I've been interested in, since then.
So you're telling me that you were in a law firm and you were inspired to do innovation? That's what you're saying. You were working in a law firm. You're like,
well, that may be a bit of a stretch for that time. No, I would. I was just sorting out. I was the gopher, and I was sorting out computer problems. But I realized I had a
knack for the problem. Right.
But I will say this though: law firms have a whole lot of scope for innovation.
Right.
You all have an amazing. You're like a treasure trove of customer problems, and as you know. Customer problems are the most valuable thing that you can understand in business, and you all know them very well, but don't always do the best job. Not Navistar, of course.
Oh, of course. What we do is totally different. All right, I want to, before we get into, because I know you've got some observations around what's happening in the moment and kind of being. I see you as somebody, because you are in the Oxford Innovation Group, see someone as at the cutting edge of innovation and knowing changes and how things are working. So I'm particularly interested in what's happening during this time. But before we get onto that, tell me about your shift into when you started your first business, because I'm always interested in what that mindset shift was from being an employee to being an entrepreneur. What had to change for you, and what do you feel is still changing?
So I think one of the big shifts that you have to face is when you're an employee, you're in a well-structured environment. Presumably, especially if you're in a decent-sized company, where you have a department and a person or people responsible for everything. And then you go and start your own thing. And also you're charting, you're helping to sail somebody else's ship.
Right.
You know, so you just follow the captain and you work your oar as hard as you can, and you know, you're good. All of a sudden, you're thrust into this environment where, you know, it's your job plus every other job, large and small, that it's just coming at you. And some people describe it as trying to drink from a fire hose. It's
Right.
yeah. I mean, if you're not the kind of person that can manage that, then it will overwhelm you.
Right.
I suppose so that's one big thing. One of the other things, it's you know, it's really becoming dependent on your own judgment. Learning to trust your own judgment, because it can be very lonely starting your own business. You may have people around you and so on, but you know, if you're sort of leading the charge, then you know, you have to make the decision, yes or no. Do we spend the money on this or that? Do I keep this person or fire them? And so all of a sudden, you know, you have to bear the brunt of your decisions, and you have to be really honest about your decision making. Because, for example, you know, in the IT world, in the tech world, they always talk about, you know, nobody ever gets fired for hiring IBM. You know, so
they talk about that in every environment. Yeah, they're like,
yeah. Everybody wants to be safe, right? So you go, you do the status quo thing, and you know that your boss is not going to fire you, even if the project fails. Well, when it's your business and it's a small business, choosing the wrong supplier, even if you go and hire the IBM, and it doesn't work, then you're out of business. You can't pay your bills. You can't. So trusting your own judgment and having the courage to follow through on that is, I think, another. It becomes even more important in many ways.
Yeah, that's such a huge level of responsibility, isn't it? And yet, with that, you don't have the time to spend. You don't have the time or the money to spend working out exactly what the best option is. You kind of got to move with it. So you've got to make that decision, but you've also got to make that decision at speed, you know? So
you do.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think you make a great point there, Joe. This is kind of an overdone, but it's falling forward rather than falling backwards, because you're still going to make mistakes.
Right.
But in that environment, it's so important that you fall forward and you keep moving forward. You know, because as you say, you make quick decisions, it's going to happen. And also try to minimize the impact of your decisions. So if you're going to go with a whole new product range, you know, test it leanly and cheaply before you go down that road, buying lots of inventory, or you know, designing the whole service, whatever it may be. And that's really important as well in that environment, because you will make mistakes.
Especially when you come from corporates and you're used to an expense account. You're like, oh yeah, I'll just catch a cab to my next meeting. No, you're gonna walk.
You're gonna walk.
The budget right now. All right, so tell me, Jamaica still in lockdown?
They're just beginning to lift now, slowly, in a very measured way. You know, like I think it's happening in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
To begin to slowly get the wheels of commerce turning again.
Sure.
You know, so recently they reopened in a limited way bars, which, you know, created a stir on the internet. Lots of, you can imagine all the stories going around, people dancing and jumping around, and so they can go and drink rum. Very importantly, they opened churches as well. Jamaica, I heard a statistic, and I don't know if it's true, that Jamaica has more churches per square mile than anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
It's way up there anyway. So we're an interesting society. Beside every you know, church, there's probably a rum shop as well.
The church and the bars. That's catering for both ends of the spectrum. You know,
Absolutely.
That's like everybody's in there. Then that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Tell me what you're observing in Jamaica, in UK, globally, really, from a business perspective. What are you seeing?
So I'm seeing, you know, Joe, it's a real interesting time. I'm seeing a massive shift in the global economy to the extent that, you know, it's one of those times where I don't know if there's been anything like this in recent time that's going to cause as significant a shift in customer behavior, customer needs and requirements.
Right.
Like dramatic, wholesale, and it's all happened in such a short space of time.
Right. You mean going online, everything having to be done remotely in a way that it's not had to be done before?
Going online, yes, everything having to be done in a different way, yes. Yes, so going online is one, and everything having to be done in a different way is a separate item, of which online is only one part.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. You know, so and I'll give you a couple examples as we go along. But yeah, so it's a massive shift, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity right now for the companies that are progressive, forward gear, to win really big. And unfortunately, and this is my own limited observation, not a lot of people of businesses are really thinking like this. So what I hear a lot of now is, you know, there's loads of information about surviving the pandemic time in business, but there's not much. There's stuff about cost cutting and rationalizing and all that good stuff, which you absolutely must do, because if you run out of cash, you don't have a business. Okay, so I'm not belittling that.
And that's the rule you were talking about earlier, like keep the cost down, keep it on a shoestring, keep it lean, like that's an important part of any business, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't want to belittle that as well, because, you know, having worked with loads of SMEs especially over the last 5-6 years, I've seen so many of them with great ideas go bust just because they didn't monitor, you know, the critical success factors like having a cash flow and, you know, having efficient operations. Those things are super important. And I think a lot of businesses are looking at ways of doing that. What I don't hear a great deal about is, you know, actually thriving in this time. And so not just surviving in spite of COVID, so not just surviving COVID, but actually thriving in spite of it, sorry. So, you know, what I'm seeing is two different kinds of reactions to the whole thing. You have those that are on hunker down mode, like I just described it, and you have a smaller number that are in full-on innovate, let's go. And you know, I give you a quick analogy. If you think about a large fishing pond, you go fishing every summer, and you're standing under a big tree, the same tree, and you have your bait and your special fishing rod, your strategy, and it works for you, and you catch lots of fish. And then one year there's a massive unprecedented, unpredicted drought. And the level of that water goes down, you know, 10, 15 feet or more. You know, if you are determined to keep catching fish, then what do you do as an individual? You would put on your boots, or your wellies as you call them in the UK, walk down to the new water line, stepping in the mud and so on, and cast your line in the water and keep fishing, right? Well, you know, what's happening is that you're seeing a divergence. So some people are doing that, going and meeting their customers where they're at. But a significant number of businesses, both large and small, are still standing at the old water line with their fishing line in the mud, hoping that a monsoon is going to come and bring their customers back to them, to where they are. And, you know, look, I'm not going to go into the statistics because they're all over the news every day, but, you know, just throw two numbers to you. The US, which is the biggest economy in the world, and one in which many of our countries depend on, you know, trade relations and travel and so on for business. The US has just passed 40 million people unemployed. That means that 12% of the population and 25% of the workforce is now unemployed in the US. And that is massive. So what's just happened is that the weatherman has just told us that there is no monsoon coming, but loads of people are still standing at the old water line with their line in the mud, waiting for it to come.
Yeah.
And they're not coming anytime soon.
let's just say those numbers, you're talking about numbers which are as at, I mean, I assume as at today, so we're beginning of June.
Or soon.
Those numbers don't even, they're not even taking into account, because there's a lot of support for people at the moment, when that support dries up. So when there's a further, it's almost like it said there's no water, to use your analogy, there's not going to be any rain for another couple of months, but actually it's not just saying that, it's saying there's no rain and the sun is going to be twice as hot. You know, I don't know if the sun can be twice as hot, but it's going to be twice as hot. And therefore there's going to be further shrinking of that pool. So you're going to have to move even further. That's what I get from that analogy.
Absolutely, 100%. You have to stay agile, and you have to stay, yeah.
Now, because this is, I mean, as a small business myself, I think this has been, I feel like I took, you know, I probably haven't shared this with you, but this is where I got my mindset during those first couple of weeks was, this is going to be really, like, the panic I feel has gone over. There are things now that's like, okay, we've had a chance to adjust, we've had a chance to shift. What must we be doing now with your innovation hat on? I know you can't teach anybody to innovate, but what sorts of things can we be doing to shift us away from, or to move us closer towards that water's edge?
Yeah, so the first thing is, so you can't teach, you can't teach people to innovate, but, you know, look, a lot of innovation is just simply allowing an environment for creative thinking. So allowing your team to think very creatively, and ensuring that they know that their opinions are being, you know, at least considered. Get your people around you, whether it be your team or just your friends and family and others, to throw their ideas into the pot, because usually within that there's something there that you can work with. So that's one. You know, Joe, I think now is a time where I'm not sure if there's been a time where businesses have been in a better position to understand their own customers more so than now, to understand the challenges and the pains and and the priorities of their customers. Reason being, every business person is fighting the same invisible enemy that their customers are fighting right now.
Right.
The same anxieties, the same stresses, and so on and so forth. And it is a very urgent and very dominant opponent. So, you know, you're in a position to walk a little more closely in your customer's shoes than you have ever been before, because you're going through the very same thing. You know, I give you just a small example. You know, a friend of mine in the UK is involved in an app that allows gas technicians to be able to, you know, do their checks. You know, have to go and do the checks and then issue a gas certificate for your gas burning equipment, your stove, your boiler, and all that. And this app, it helps to speed up the process for the technician, and it allows them to issue a digital certificate. Their usage in the last 2 months has gone leaps and bounds. It has skyrocketed because it helps to reduce the frequency and number of touch points between the technician and the customer's environment. And nobody wants strangers in their home for too long at this point, and nobody even wants to take a piece of paper. So I found that quite interesting. You know, so we know about the Amazons and all these other stories, but there's some really simple, and look, that's an idea that any gas technician, if they sat down for a minute and said, okay, I'm in the gas business, what would I not want, or what would I want, how to see this business change? Would I want somebody coming into my home to inspect all my equipment and so on? How would I handle that? What could I do? You know, so this is what I'm talking about, walking in your customer's own shoes. You know, you're talking about meeting customers where they are. You know, you have a lot of people that are adapting now, and you know, there are loads more examples we can talk about. But things like, you know, I heard about an insurance company which I believe is in Singapore, that acknowledged that there was a problem of taxi drivers not wanting to carry healthcare workers because of the health risks, and they offered a special insurance to taxi drivers in case they get, in the case they contract COVID, that they would get some medical support, or at least some cash towards that. So talk about meeting customers where they are. That's understanding the customer's pain right then and there, going in, providing a very useful solution to say, hey, okay, we understand this problem. We cannot prevent you from contracting COVID, but at least if you do, we're going to make sure that your income is partially replaced, because you can't drive a taxi anymore once you have COVID. So that's solving. I thought that was a great idea of meeting your customers where
and it's not necessarily creating a new software in 30 days. I mean, I do know somebody, I actually, there's two clients, one I interviewed, who was creating a COVID app to work out where people were. And I don't know how far that has got down, because I know there are other apps as well.
Yes.
I mean, that's a big undertaking to get that done within the first 2 weeks of all this stuff.
Sure.
But the other thing was a gentleman I spoke to who had created, he was doing virtual escape rooms. And they were
great idea.
£10,000 a day. They've got a surf place, a gym, like a real leisure center. And they went from 10,000 a day down to 0. And he was creating, not virtual, he says not virtual, it's like an online escape room. So you can go on, somebody takes you through. That was his innovation.
Didn't work.
And crowdfunding for it, and getting income through in advance purchases. So yeah, what you're saying is absolutely true. Like, that some of the things are the simplest things, but it's just a matter of going, what's the problem and how can I solve it? And some of the time it was like, what's my problem? My problem is nobody can come here. But even better.
And absolutely. So I think you just mentioned something really important, and going back to what I was saying about sitting in your customer's own shoes, is that a very significant number of innovations, especially within the business environment, are created by users and not by suppliers, and that's well documented. And but I think there are a number of things that people can be doing in this time. And I think the critical 3, in my opinion, what can you do to win? I think one is, and this one is, you need to know your customers better than you ever have before. You really and truly need to know. I know it's something that everybody says, but it's more true now than before, I believe. I think the next thing is, you need to consider yourself a customer service organization that happens to sell legal services or real estate or accounting services or whatever it is that you're in the business of doing, because that helps transform the way that you look at your customers. And the third thing I think is that you need to be experimenting a whole lot with new value propositions. And nowadays, it's easier and cheaper to do that than ever before.
Right, and actually because you're limited by certain things, you're limited by certain perimeters, it actually I find it makes things easier often, because you can't think, oh yeah, we're going to buy a property in the middle of nowhere and we'll have people come. There's certain things you just can't do. So it almost makes things easier. I find innovation easier when I've got a couple of restraints.
And you kind of know where the customer's eyeballs are going to be right now.
Yeah, because it's going to be limited, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. So so look, Joe, so knowing your customers, and there's so many ways of doing it, but I'm sure you're familiar with the jobs to be done methodology, or you may have heard of it before.
I have heard of it. I'm not familiar enough with it, but yes. Yeah, tell me about jobs to be done.
Okay, so it's a method that I've used before with great results, and there's a great case study in the Harvard Business Review that outlines what it's about.
Right.
And so I just tell you the story quickly. A real estate developer in Detroit many years ago, trying to develop small 2-bedroom apartments for people who are downsizing. They went and did all the customer surveys, in fact, more than one survey, and found out from customers exactly what they wanted, what price point they wanted, what kind of finishings and fittings, what kind of room sizes. So for example, you need a large 2nd bedroom for when families coming over to visit and so on. They put the flats on the market, the show flats and so on, very, very lackluster sales. So what they then did was they went back, did more surveys, and the same thing happened again. They made some tweaks and the show flats wouldn't sell. They employed this method of call jobs to be done, which is a method of understanding at a much deeper level what your customers' intended outcome and objectives are, and then finding out what's preventing them from getting there at a deeper level than just, hey, I'm selling apartments.
Right. So instead of the big the double bedroom, it's what's the reason behind that?
Oh yeah. So absolutely. So in a nutshell, they had lots of conversations with customers, and this takes time, but it's so valuable. I've done this a few times myself, and the insights that come out are incredible. And what kept coming up in the conversations was things like dining tables and so on. To cut a long story short, they realized that customers had a lot of anxiety about what to do with the large pieces of, family sentimental furniture when they're moving from this big house to this small place. So right. in the middle of a tight economy, they did a few things. Well, first of all, they reduced the size of the second bedroom, directly contrary to what customers were saying, in order to make more space in the living area so you could get a few things in. And then they also increased the price of the apartments by $5,000. And what that did was that paid for off-site storage for every purchaser, wow. free moving services for every purchaser, as well as a staging area on-site for people to be able to put their stuff before they move into their apartment. So they remove the customer's anxiety. But here's the most important thing about that point, is they changed their value proposition from we're selling the best apartments with the greatest features and so on, to we are in the business of transferring lives.
Wow.
So if you think about it, if you understand your customers' objectives at that deeper level, and you're in the game of real estate, think about it. We're no longer building the best apartments with the marble countertops and the swanky toilets and all. We're transferring people's lives. So your architects and engineers, your salespeople, everybody in the company all of a sudden starts to think completely differently about the product. And that's really, really powerful. And the apartments all sold off when they did those things. So I would highly recommend everybody go Google jobs to be done and start having conversations with your customers that allow them to talk about stuff that matters to them, not necessarily what matters to you. In fact, I'd throw out a challenge, Joe, to you and whoever else wants. When next time you talk to your customer, try to find out 5 things about them, 5 of their pains or their desires that have nothing to do with your business.
Ooh.
Because in that example I just gave you, no customer would ever have told a real estate developer, I don't know what to do with my grandmother's dining table. They would have said to them, yes, I want these kind of countertops, I need a bathroom of this size, I need this kind of flooring, etc., etc. Because that's the kind of conversation that you have with a real estate developer. You don't talk about your grandmother's dining table.
Yes, because you don't actually know what the issue is. You don't know, and you have no idea that that's what may be stopping you from buying a certain thing. You just know that and then presumably when you've had those conversations, there's going to be a pattern of the things that come up most. And then you're focusing on those for the areas of innovation, right?
100%. And it actually
works. That customer problem, not the customer problem like with the legal profession. It's like, oh, my client has a legal issue. How do I solve that problem? Actually, the problem that they may be having, or I've got to furlough somebody. What's that? Oh, the solution is this instead. It may be we're having cash flow issues, or we are finding ourselves, particularly in this environment, not able to grow at the rate at which we want to grow. We're doing something else. Yeah, I see. Okay, I'm just going to take you up on that. I'm going to take you up on that. I've written it down.
But Joe, to go even deeper, so you wrote down that 5.
I wrote that down. 5 things, pains or desires. Right, written down.
Good. But so here are things that your customers and everybody's customers are worrying about. Here's what's mattering to people now. In addition to other things that will come up in your interviews are, like you just said, how do I meet next month's payroll as a business person? I'm not just a business person, I'm a human being as well. How do I keep healthy and in shape when I'm at home?
Right.
How does this whole environment change? Am I cooking more at home now? How do I plan my meals? I don't, I need to cut my hair. I can't go to the hair salon, the barber shop. Joe, I saw a video on YouTube last week or a week before it was a simple, very simple video. You could have done a better job of it. It was, home cutting, tips for cutting your hair at home, and it was targeted at men. The video got 4.5 million views.
Wow.
On YouTube, yeah. You just go Google and, doing your hair at home or cutting your hair at home or beauty care for home, whatever. It's exploded just since, this COVID-19 time. Simple things. And that could be an amazing way to get people into your sales funnel if that's what you wanted to do.
Right. Well, and that's where I tell you what, and this is a really useful conversation because this is what interests me. When we get into things that are not relevant to the business, like I posted something the other day by a trauma therapist, Adele, who's around mental health. And for me, the mental health of business is a really important part. I also am seeing a lot around survival. I also think that businesses are in a difficult position at the moment for various reasons.
Yes.
And for me also, because me as an individual, I was like, my mental health was not at its peak 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So that for me was something that was contextual, and it was something that I knew other people had been struggling with, and it was relevant. That's one thing. But like, if I was to then start going, well, you know what, I think what I'll do is I'll set up a blog around cutting hair, beauty tips. It doesn't fit with what you're doing. So it has to have those, I can see it as like circles. Like this is what we usually talk about. These are personal problems that they're having. It's that sweet spot, isn't it? Because there's only the sweet spot that we can either solve or that there's a relevance to the connection. Is that right?
Yeah. I think you are right. And maybe cutting hair, hair cutting tips may be a bit far off, but it's contextual as well, because for example, if you knew some of your closer clients, and you could say, hey, a bunch of, I don't know, your female friends who want to go on their Zoom meetings, here's this great beautician who's going to show you how to do it, and here's some tips, and you send around a WhatsApp video, so it's in more of a social context. It still warms people to you personally, Joe. But take it further down. Yes. So, in your context, you're dealing with small business clients. And I just heard, what was it, 2 weeks ago, that there was a big backlog of companies receiving their government aid. Yes. So the British Business Bank is having a real trouble dispensing those loans. And I understand that the problem is related to just getting through the backlog of the due diligence and all that kind of stuff. Now, as a lawyer, is there some way that you can help your clients to speed up that process or not? I don't know. Right. But that is something that's going to win you major loyalty. It's not directly related to legal services, but it's closely, it's in one of those circles.
That's totally aligned. That's in one of those circles. Love it. I'm writing that down too. Before we go, because this is all super valuable. I can't see us actually doing a 3-minute video on this because it's going to be cutting off the juice of it. Tell me what sort of problems your clients are finding at the moment, and how are you solving them? So, or how do you intend to solve them, depending on where you are?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And it's a mix. It's a real mix. What we're seeing is, people struggling to figure out, how do I change the game? How do I keep my revenue streams going? Because, I'm out of business. What do I do? So, if you look, for example, at, I don't know, think about businesses that have no foot traffic anymore, whether they be restaurants or we just spoke about, beauty salons, for example, and so on. how do you still get your customer to achieve their end outcome and use this time to hopefully generate some revenue, but at least maintain customer loyalty and or grow your customer loyalty very significantly. So if you have a restaurant, if you have a group of restaurants, how can you engage people at home now? What are their problems? They need good meals, they need great experiences. What I'm seeing people doing now is, for example, doing lots of wine tasting and experiences like that online for groups.
Right.
Everybody gets their meal delivered to them and the wines and all sorts of things like that. So you're providing that in-home experience as a means of still engaging your customers. So it's about thinking outside the box, really digging under the skin of what matters to your customers. But Joe, you asked me a question. So I can give you loads of examples of things that companies can do to change the game. But the fundamental is changing your mindset to accept the fact that, look, so I may be a real estate developer for small offices, for example, for office spaces. I cannot sell office spaces now. Well, maybe I can, be people downsizing and so on. But let's assume I cannot sell down. But I really understand what makes a good office space. Can I segue that somehow into another service to help my customers? So for example,
right.
Do I go and start to create a virtual reality experience, office experience, and start selling it to corporates that are moving on to this more and more into home working, the home working environment, because some people struggle with that. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about with people.
Wow, that's futuristic stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is futuristic, but it's not as futuristic as you think, because the technology is all there, it all works, but nobody's using it necessarily in that way. So if you really understand what creates a perfect work environment, why not go work with a VR developer? Many of them are out there willing to just experiment and try new stuff. It doesn't have to cost you a lot to create a virtual environment where you and your colleagues can sit and interact. Now, that's the kind of thing that you need to be thinking about. So you could be a real estate developer that becomes a software distributor, kind of thing.
Amazing, amazing. How do people get in contact with you, Matthew, and what channels can they use to contact you?
The LinkedIn, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, Matthew Mclarty, or just go to pathfinder4.com, the website, and you'll find my details there as well. That's the consulting business that I have.
And like the ideas that he's generating now, like this is what he's like all the time. You've always got these ideas that like, hey, you could do this, because I guess this is what you do is speak to customers all the time, and so you get these opportunities to understand what their problems are, what their customers' problems are. You're in this all the time, and innovation is kind of in your blood, isn't it? So that's why I wanted to talk to you today, and also to give us all, I think, as businesses, some hope that there is a different way. Like we don't have to wait till the water rises. There are still fish in this deep pool, but it's just further out, and we have to wade, and we have to take a bit of effort, but we don't all have to. We can do it all together.
100%. And Joe, I want to give you one quick example. This is a simple one where you're not going far out. You're not going to VR or AI or anything like that. There's not even much technology involved. I have a car that needs to be serviced, and it's gone overdue now, and I haven't taken it in because I have this anxiety, which I'm sure loads of people, I don't want any stranger sitting in my car right now. So, what do you do? Call up the dealership. They said that when the car comes in, they spray it down and sanitize it. But I'm thinking in the back of my mind, well, what do you do before I get it back? That's what I'm more concerned about. Anyway, it's a simple anxiety, just like dining tables were for that in the example I gave earlier. That's preventing me from taking my car down. Now, if the car breaks down, there's a serious problem. I have no choice. Okay, fine. But think about how much revenue car dealerships might be losing right now because loads of people like me don't want to take it in for a non-essential job. So if, for example, you just put out to your customers a simple 2-minute video showing the over-the-top precautions you're taking. Every car gets sprayed and wiped down as it comes in and before it leaves. You know, only one member of staff sits in your car, and they wear a plastic overall thing, you know, to prevent when they're sitting in your car. And when your car is finished, we show you a video, we send you a video of us cleaning out your car, bring it down and say, okay, your car is ready now. I would be very happy. And that may seem a bit over the top, but one of the biggest anxieties that people have now is their safety. And so you can't go. I don't think there's anything that's too extreme to show your customers. So that's another simple example of how you don't need a lot of technology, just good communication and understanding what's bothering your customers. It is really important.
And again, I mean, interestingly, because I was just thinking about myself, I was like, these videos have come off the back of conversations with clients who are like,
yes,
I don't think I know what to do next. Someone I spoke to said, I don't have a badge for COVID yet. Like, I don't have my Scouts badge for COVID yet. Like, still living the experience. And so in living the experience, I want to hear what other people are going through, other people who are in business, other people who have the same experience as me. What are they doing? And other experts who would usually advise me. So I guess this has come off the back of that. Plus the fact, personally, I wanted to speak to some cool people. That's a cool conversation, and have an excuse for people to pick up the phone and be like, yeah, I'm here, let's have a conversation.
So you're pretty cool too. You're one of the greatest connectors that I know. I'm looking forward to our next hangout when I'm in London again.
Oh my gosh, please. Well, personally, I'm thinking it might be in Jamaica. I might be in Jamaica sooner than you're in London, to be honest.
Anytime. Just let me know.
Thank you so much. For all of you those that have watched, you should definitely get in contact with Matthew, especially if you have, I mean, particularly for me, if my anxiety is like, oh, what are we going to do next? Innovation is the key. Like, no more of this pivot word. Like, the pivot word is out. Like, let's start moving forward. Let's get the economy moving forward. And we as small businesses, we are not even small businesses, just business full stop. We as businesses are in a position to be able to do that in a really powerful way. We can affect change. We can move things quickly. We can pivot. We can do things differently. And we're at the forefront of that. We're at the cutting edge. And Matthew's definitely helped me. He's helped me today, let alone in the past. So get in contact with him. Subscribe if you enjoy listening to this SME stories. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us, and see you guys again soon.